Hey, what's up guys? Alex here with a new video, and I normally would not be throwing lenses like that, but today we're talking Sony E-mount. We're talking about the new 7Artisans 85mm f1.8 lens, a new budget 85mm in the Sony E-mount family. This lens retails for $299, and it essentially almost is half the price of the Sony 85 1.8. Before we talk any further, I do have to share, 7Artisans did reach out to me and did send me this lens for review, but as always, no money exchanged hands, and they did not ask me to say anything. Today we're doing a first impressions video because I've only used this lens for a few weeks. We'll cover build quality, autofocus, and image quality, and we'll start with build quality. So this lens, like I mentioned, retails for $299, but it does not feel like a budget lens. It's made out of metal and plastic. It has an autofocus manual focus switch, a customizable button, an aperture ring, and a USB-C port for firmware upgrades. This lens feels really solid in the hand, but also lightweight. It's a good combo of quality materials and a nice weight. Here though is also its biggest con, and as a matter of fact, spoiler alert, the only con I found on this lens, and it's the aperture ring. This aperture ring does not have a locking function, so it has a function for you to control it with the camera, but it does not have a locking function or a clickable aperture, which means it is a smooth ring throughout. Well, why is that a con? Because it's not a lockable aperture ring, and the ring is actually so smooth, it moves so easily. So I actually used this lens in a family session a few weeks ago, and as I had the camera kind of just dangling next to me, the lens just hitting my body would move the aperture ring. Now, like I mentioned, I normally actually use it in A mode because I like controlling the aperture with my camera. And I would find myself picking up my camera and I'd be at f16 or f11 because the ring had moved, and that got really annoying really fast. So that is my biggest con with this lens, and we'll talk more about it when we wrap it up, but I wanted to make sure I addressed it here in build quality. What about autofocus? This lens, and I think to no surprise, most E-mount third-party lenses, performs like a native lens. IAF worked, it was sticky, it was snappy. There's really nothing to say other than it works like a native lens. Even in backlit situations, this lens performed great. It has STM motors, and as a whole, again, like I mentioned, boring subject, autofocus works. Move on to image quality, the most important part. So in image quality, here's where a budget lens usually can fall apart, and I was super impressed. At 1.8, this lens is sharp, and you usually get a 1.8 lens to shoot it at 1.8, and I was really impressed by the image quality. But what really impressed me is how it performs with backlit subjects. Usually with cheaper lenses, you don't have the optical coating, so when you backlight a subject, you lose contrast and you kind of get a hazy image, but this lens performed. I shot it with a backlit subject for an entire family session, and the images that came out of it were great. So super impressed by image quality. Another thing that impressed me is how many aperture blades it has. So the Sony 85 1.8 has 9 aperture blades. This lens actually has 11 rounded aperture blades, so it has 2 more. And what that means for you is, if you're shooting at f2 or 2.8, just a little stop down, you're still gonna get round circular bokeh. The less aperture blades, the more kind of jagged and rough it is, but here with 11, you're getting some really good background blur. And I was surprised that a budget lens had that many, and I think it outperforms the Sony in some of the comparisons I've seen. So, at $299, is this lens worth picking up? I think it's worth considering if you're looking at an 85mm lens. Like I mentioned, and this could be a deal breaker for some, the aperture ring is extremely easy to move and bump, and there is no locking function. So be aware of that when you're using this camera, because just carrying it around with my camera, hitting my hip, moved the aperture ring, and like I said, that got super annoying. But that's the only bad thing I can say about it. The autofocus was great, and the image quality is definitely punching above its $299 price point. But what do you guys think? Is the aperture ring a deal breaker? Let me know down in the comments below. As always, please smash the like button, please subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good one, guys. Peace.